Good morning. Let's get started. I gave this command. This may take a couple of minutes to run. Meanwhile, I'll just summarize what we have discussed so far. Probably in the last 5 sessions, we've gone through TypeScript introduction, some of the concepts of TypeScript which are useful in Angular, and then CLI, how to install it and project setup, then templates, components, how to create custom components, and then data binding, pipes, and custom pipes. So these are the few topics that we have covered so far. And today we'll talk about the HTTP calls. So when you go to product list component, we're actually binding this hard-coded data uh, here on this product list component. Rather, I want this to be fetched from the web service that we have built as part of our Node.js course and want to bind that data. So let's go to Heroku. I don't exactly remember the URL of that project. Let's see what is that. Probably this one. Okay, this is the URL. Say API/products. We get the products. And this is what I want to get it and bind it. So let's copy everything, come back here and try to get rid of this. So we need an HTTP. So I'm going to get this HTTP client. This is the wrong import. It is part of Angular common HTTP. And here I'm going to just say this dot HTTP dot get and the URL. I want to bind this to my products. So I'll say whatever the return type is, I'll say this dot products, get rid of this, the type mismatch error you have seen. So we'll say that this is of any type and I'm binding the result of this HTTP call to this dot product. So there is more to it, but at least let this work. And as this is going to be an asynchronous call because we are making a call to a web service, and definitely this is asynchronous. So we need to use async pipe here. Then only we'll get the data. So inspect it, go to console. Probably we might have missed something. Here it is. It says there is no injector for HTTP client or no provider. What this means is we are using this HTTP client here, but it is not available in our project, which means your Angular application is not able to figure out what this HTTP client means because it is part of a different module. Go to app_module.ts and try to import it. Say import HTTP client module. It is part of HTTP library. Now add an import statement here. It's common HTTP is the name of the library. Save this. Now this should fix the issue. Okay. So there is an error. Don't worry about all those things. at this moment. So what I'm going to do is to actually demonstrate this async pipe. I'll create a new component and then I'll demonstrate this HTTP and all those things. We'll come back here and fix the issue. So I'll try to create a users component. I'll say user.component.ts or say users. And we know how to create a component. Let's add a decorator, which will have a selector. I'll say app users and which will have some template. I'll go with backticks. Then I'll export my class, export class users component. Here it is created. So here I would like to have my constructor and I would like to get HTTP services. So I'll inject that here. I'll say HTTP client. It is part of Angular HTTP common. I know where to be seen. So I'll just manually add an import statement. Here it is. And I'll make a request here. I'll say this dot users. I need to declare this. I'll say users of type any equals to http.get. So I'll make a web service call somewhere else. I'll say, okay, on some other URL. GitHub has an API. So I'll say api.github.com/users. Just copy this, paste it, and I'll try to bind the list of products, something like this. I'll say div. I want this div to be repeated. So I'll say ng for user of users, and then say h3 user.login. Login is the field that is coming as part of the API response. If you notice here, this one. And I want avatar URL to be shown as well. That's an image. When you click on this, you'll have the image. So I'll even copy that field and try to present it as a image. So I want an image, so I cannot use div or h3 or something like that. I have to go with image tag and I'll bind the source. So you're binding the source, the user.avatar URL, and I'll go with some height and width. So I want it to be 150 and 150 or 120, whatever it is, something like this. So this is an asynchronous call. So you need to use async pipe because they say this takes some time to get resolved. Save this, go to our app component, which is our root component. There I want to consume app/users rather than consuming products. Get rid of this, it's not needed. Okay, we are broken yet. Say it's not a known element. That's pretty straightforward. Whenever you get such type of errors, make sure you have added this component to module. If you don't add it, that's what the error you see. So it's pretty obvious that I forgot to add. Just add that component in the declaration. Sorry, else I'm going to say users component, and now that should resolve. Here it is. I'm getting my data. I mean, I'm getting my data from the web service call, and I'm seeing something. I'm seeing the login name, but I'm not seeing the image. The reason is, inspect it, you will know. So the image source is set as user.avatar URL, while when you see h3 tag, it actually evaluated. Here it's not evaluated. The reason is src is an HTML attribute. It won't be evaluated unless you use property binding. So say src, now this user.avatar URL would be evaluated. If you omit these brackets, it would be considered as a literal string. So it's not a literal string, it's a property on an object. See, we are saying now something like this. We make a call and we bind it using async pipe. So let me just add few styles here. We'll go with medium 5. Yes, that's a good question. Can we give src in uh, expression? Let's see if we can do that. So let's use some classes here. Say img circle. I want it to be showed in circle. Anyway, that's not really important. This component is just for demonstration, just to demonstrate the async pipe. Here it is. Okay, coming back to the question. So can I remove this property binding and give double curly braces like this? I don't see why you cannot do that, because it would be evaluated pretty much and you should see the image like this. Still, we are not breaking anywhere and it simply works. So that's good. But again, personally, I like this one because I believe that the double curly braces here, it's ugly. So this is cool. Actually, this is a new syntax, and probably uh, in Angular 1 you would have done that, the curly braces inside in double quotes. But here we have property binding. You can pretty much leverage it. Okay, so that's async pipe. And now our product list component didn't work with the async pipe. The reason is, if you notice here, the API is returning an array of objects and I'm simply binding it. Our API is little complex, the structure. It's not returning direct data, rather it is returning an object. Inside that object you have metadata. So when you try to do a ngFor on top of this data, this product's data is not just data, rather it is everything. So it's not able to loop through because your ngFor will work only on arrays or a kind of a collection objects. It has to be a collection list. So that's why it couldn't work. There are workarounds for that. But anyway, let's go back to again users component.ts and see the other way how we can do that without using async pipe. Get rid of this. You can subscribe to this observable. This returns an observable, and this is a concept which we haven't talked about yet. We will talk about it, but you can subscribe to it. And the first parameter returns, the first parameter is the success. I'm sorry, it's first callback. And I'll bind this users to response. The second one is error. I'll say this dot console.log error. And then finally, there is another parameter complete. Okay, don't worry about this syntax. Don't worry about anything yet. Let's see if this works. So when I get a success response, I'm binding this to this dot users. If everything goes good, still our API application should be working as it was. Yep. Still it's working fine. So this is another way. And this is what I will do in the case of product list component. Subscribe it. Go to product list component, remove this async pipe, and Okay, anyway, let's try to get it working with async pipe. Let me give it a try. So something like this, people do it. Okay, products is the entire object, and we are binding data property on it using async. Okay, if I remember the syntax correctly, this product list should work. Go to app component. There is no need to again use users component anymore. That was just for demonstration. So go with product list. Okay, still we're not getting. I'll have a look at the syntax. I don't exactly remember, but you can do something similar to that. Bind. Anyway, let's not worry about it. I'll have a look at the syntax. If you have deeply nested structure, how to use async pipe. Okay, let's get rid of this at this moment. Now I want this to work. So what I'm going to do, I'll get even this rid of it. I'll subscribe to this observable and say subscribe. First parameter gets you the response. On top of response, you have data property. So I'll bind this products to the response dot data because that's what I want. I'm not dealing with the pagination. So because of TypeScript, you're getting this error. You know how can you access object properties in another notation? This is dot notation. You have something like bracket notation. So here you can use that one just to suppress that error. And the second parameter is error. At this moment, when I get an error, I just want to suppress. I just want to console.log it. That's it. And finally, you can have a third parameter complete, which pretty much you can omit it. It's not really important. Save this. Okay. So looks like there are more issues with respect to the APIs. There is something known as CORS issue we are saying. So the origin of this request is localhost 4000, and the origin for this is this best node API herokuapp.com. So because of the origin and the this domain, both are different. The domain of this one and domain of this API both are different. So I cannot make a request. And it's a security issue. So that's why the Chrome browser is actually suppressing the request, saying that you cannot do that. So we need to do more work on the API side. We'll do it, but before doing that, we'll try to make sure we understand the observables correctly. So go back and till we fix the issue with the API, we'll use app users in the app component. Probably we missed that part when we are developing APIs. So anyway, it's a good chance that we can fix it. At least we got what sort of errors will you notice. So now you might have understood that not everybody can access your API because of this security feature. So that's the feature that is enforced by the browsers. Browsers will not allow you to access an API from different origin. In that case, even your UI has to be deployed on the same domain, or you have to explicitly allow this domain on your API, saying that, okay, I trust this domain. Any request that is coming from this domain, accept it or give permission, something like that. So anyway, let's get back. So what are these observables? Go to users component. Here I've subscribed it. So we have talked about callbacks, we have talked about promises, and the next technology is observables. It is not part of JavaScript yet. So in order to include them, we are using a library by the name RxJS because it's not yet part of JavaScript official language. So we are using RxJS library to support observables. So Angular by default returns an observable whenever you make a web service call. It's not a promise. It used to be a promise in Angular 1, but from the latest version of Angular, they have changed it to an observable. An observable will have a subscribe function and with three callback parameters. So let's see how can we create observables and how can we deal with that. So I'll go to my desktop and try to create an empty folder, say observable demo. Open this in Visual Studio Code, create an index.js file, and we need, as I told you, we need a library. So let's include a package.json file also, say npm init -y. And then I'll install rxjs library. So we have talked about this asynchronous calls a couple of times, one callbacks and then promises. We haven't talked about observables. So let me revise those concepts. The callbacks, I'll create again the same old add async function, which takes two parameters and then which has some delay and gives you the response after 2 seconds, the result. I'll say var c equals to a plus b. When I say return c, I won't be able to catch the return type. I'm saying, okay, execute this after 2 seconds. Simple enough, an inbuilt function which executes this function after 2 seconds. So if I want to catch the return type of this add async function, I will not be able to do it straight away. The reason is it's asynchronous call. Console.log, open in another command prompt, say node index.js. It gives me undefined and after 2 seconds the program will exit. But if I want to know when this operation is completed, because it's asynchronous, there is a time delay involved in it. In that case, the old conventional way is to create a callback function. So you create a callback function which gives the result in as a parameter. You'll say console.log result, and you pass that callback as a parameter to your add async function. And this add async function would be able to accept that parameter and it calls that function whenever that operation is completed. And this is what we have done as part of callbacks and of course pretty much in Node.js. Sure enough, I'll get my result. And then we have talked about the issues with these callbacks is because we are giving too much control to the entity or third-party entity than it deserves. So it can call this callback as many times as it wants. So that's a serious security flaw. So we don't want to give that much control to that entity, assuming that this is a third party library and we don't want to give it absolute control and we don't want to live at the mercy of this add async function. So we said that okay, let's get rid of this. Any asynchronous operation, we want to return a promise. I'll say promise, and this promise has two functions, resolve and reject. And here promise resolve I'll say C equals to A plus B, or here I'll just say CV failed to calculate. Okay, if you want to add set timeout here, you can add it. And to keep things simple, I'm not adding because that adds more nesting. But if you have some delay, you can add set timeout function or any database calls, whatever it is. So this promise will be returned by this entity. So now you are taking the control back in your hands. Let's get rid of this. Now you have a promise. You don't need to pass a callback function to him. You just say you get your promise, and on top of that promise, you can invoke then function. And the first function is your success function. You will have your result. You'll say console.log result. I don't want this error. I want this operation to be successful. So I'm doing this. See, I have my result. And if you want this promise to fail or get rejected, probably you'll do something like this. Invoke the, I'm not catching it. So you can catch the return type or the error using catch. Say console.log error, whatever comes in here. Just say probably I'm missing something here. Let's go with this one here. Let's get rid of this. Okay, now it is throwing. Anyhow, it's not the discussion about promises. I'm just going step by step. So promises gave you control. Now it's up to you how many times you want to resolve it and how, and if you want to resolve at all or not. So it's up to you because you're taking your control and you get a token. This token is something like a token in a restaurant where you order something and you get a token. That token is like a proof that you have bought something, and that's a proof that you'll get something, or you get your order, or you may get some message saying that we are out of the product or something like that. So the next step is these promises actually will execute only once. So let me say this. I'm going to say console.log calculating. So I have this calculating. I get this. So I have this promise object. I can resolve it as many times as I want. So I'm saying again here, result console.log result. See, I'm getting the response second time, but not calculating, which means it is not executing the second time. You resolve it 100 times, and this will execute only once. It's like the result is cached. It will only execute once. Okay? Get your result. The result would be cached. And this is, it's a good thing. But again, when you're dealing with events, when button is clicked, button click is also asynchronous. In that case, these promises are not really going to help you because you click a button 1,000 times, it will only execute once. So because the value is cached, probably at the time of when you're dealing with events, promises are not a best approach. So you have workarounds. It doesn't mean that you cannot do it. But again, as if you take a promise as is, it's not going to be a best approach for dealing with asynchronous events. So in that case, there comes observables. So I'll try to create an obs.js file. Here we'll talk about observables. So first, observables are not part of JavaScript, as I said. For promises, I haven't imported anything because it is part of JavaScript library. I don't need to import anything, and it worked. But that's not the case with observables. So I need to import my observable. It is part of RxJS, stands for reactive extensions for JavaScript. So you have these reactive extensions for almost all the popular languages such as Python, Java, C Sharp, same library. And this library is for JavaScript. You have reactive extension for C Sharp, Java, and Python, and so on. I want observable object from here. And I can pretty much create an observable using a source, because definitely an observable will have a source. Say it's an array, and I'll say you have from source. This is how an observable is created. This is how a promise is created. I've created, and how can I invoke it? The way you said dot then here, and you have something like subscribe here. Subscribe, and the first parameter is success. So you'll get your response. I'll say val, and I'll do a console.log val. Okay, I'm executing the same file. So you have your result. There are three elements, and you got three of them. And the second parameter that you have is another callback function. Even though we are dealing with callbacks, see, any asynchronous programming paradigm involves callbacks. Just that promises are better than the conventional way of using callbacks. Okay, promises are not there to replace callbacks. You still have callbacks, but you're getting you're writing some improved program here. So the second parameter is error. If there is any error, this callback will be invoked. And the third parameter is complete. When this source is completed, you will see this function executed. Three functions. How many functions then have? Then actually has two functions, success and error. And some people even write error in catch. It's up to you which one you want to follow. Then with one parameter or then with two parameters. If you write one parameter, you have to use catch. This is more cleaner than using two parameters, this one, but it's again your choice how you want to go. Then, and here you have subscribed. Three parameters, two parameters. Okay, now let's go ahead and execute this. See, completed. The source is completed, so you're getting this completed, and this function is executed, and this function is executed. This is not executed because there are no errors in the source or observable. That's how you subscribe and you get the result. It is the only way to create observable? No, it's not. There are a couple of ways. You can create from event. You assume that you have a data button click event. You can create it from event of the button, and we have a couple of other different ways also. So let's see how can we create other way. So what's the advantage of having these observables uh, as opposed to promises? The one observable, one difference that or one ultimate advantage that you get is it's subscribe, which means you're not going to get only one result. It can emit multiple values because you're subscribing to it. So how far this will emit the values? As long as your subscription is active. So it's like a Netflix subscription. You have a Netflix subscription, you bought the subscription. How long will you be able to stream? As long as there is data in Netflix, or as long as your subscription is ended. Two ways. Assume that Netflix has stopped their streaming and there is no more content available. In that case, there won't be any emission. And as soon as you run out of your subscription, you will not be able to receive any updates. So that's not one value, rather it's multiple. Observables emit multiple values. That's one advantage. And observables are cooler than promises because it's very cool library, this RxJS, and it has many inbuilt functions and inbuilt features that will make your life easy. We'll see one by one. First, let's go ahead and create another observable using the constructor function of this observable object. So this function accepts another function, and here you will say o dot next 1, o dot next 2, o dot next 3, something like that. Again, pretty much subscribe to it. I'm getting my values. So this is another way of creating uh, an observable. So it doesn't mean that you have to keep the values like this. There can be some delay also involved in it. Whenever there is content, you'll get a notification. So let's try to simulate that. I'm going to say set timeout after a second. Okay, I'll copy this and paste it here. Change the values. I want this value to be emitted after 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and 4 seconds. So let's see if this works. If I wrote the syntax correctly, I didn't miss anything, I should have my values. So it doesn't give me anything here. Let's see, missing something. Okay, something like this. Honestly speaking, this parameter is not needed. Say like this. So there are various applications of this. Now every second you are getting something. As soon as there is data and you are subscribed to it and you are receiving your updates. So if you don't like it, you can call unsubscribe function on this OBS and you can unsubscribe it at certain point. This is completely different from promises because promises only emits one value. That's it. They are done. While observables can emit multiple values. And the application that you can think of is chatting application. As soon as your friend is typing something or sending something, you get the response. That's one application. And it's like your friend may be sending a message after a minute or after 10 minutes. Doesn't matter. As soon as he has something pushed, you will have your subscription. That is pub sub pattern, publisher and subscriber. And another thing, I'll try to simulate some error. So I'll say set timeout. I'll say o dot error failed. Some message after 5 seconds. And after 6 seconds, 6 second, I would like to have this. O dot next 5. Let's see what happens. You will have your emission still 4, 1, and then on the 5th second you'll have an error, and that's it. So the next one would not execute after once the error has occurred, and you will stop receiving the values from that observable. And complete, there is no complete function is being executed here. The reason is this observable doesn't know when this will complete. So let me remove this failed and error condition, and I want to say completed. At 6th second, I want to say that, okay, I'm done with my emission. That's it. It is completed. So You don't necessarily have to have this complete because there can be infinite observables emitting the data forever, or there can be finite observables emitting data to a certain extent, certain time period, and then end it. It's up to you, but usually when you are making a web service call, there is going to be complete function because web service call is going to return only one value. So you don't need to even have this complete function that will execute anyhow. And these two are important. You want to catch the error, you'll go with this one. You want to catch the success, you'll go with this one. So I was talking about some of the operators that are available out of the box with this RxJS library. Let's talk about them, such as map. So you want to map the result with something. So even before talking about that, let's talk about arrow functions. I'm sure you guys already know what are arrow functions, but just to revise things. So arrow functions, you'll write a function and the equivalent function is going to be something like this. So it returns nothing. Instead of function keyword, you will have this arrow and then braces. So if you have only one line, say console.log adding, something like that, you don't even need these braces here. You'll just say console.log adding. If you have more than one line, that's when you need braces. Otherwise, braces are not needed. If you have one parameter, the parameter goes here and the output is going to be something like this. If you have only one parameter, you don't even need these braces or parentheses. Parentheses are needed when there are more than one parameter or zero parameters. But if you have only one, the parentheses can also be removed. And if you have two parameters, definitely you need parentheses at that moment. Like this. And if you're returning something, return a plus b, in that case, you can just say a plus b. You don't need to say return a plus b. It is implicitly written. You cannot have written, but actually it is written. But when you have more than one line of code, first statement is console.log and the second statement is written. In that case, you have to return explicitly like this. So these are arrow functions and the basic use case. Let's get rid of this and try to convert these functions into arrow functions because arrow functions actually removes a lot of nesting. So I'm going to say val, something like this. Clean up here. This is converted to arrow function. We have learned that when there is only one parameter, you don't even need parentheses. And try to remove even this one. See, now it looks better. So subscribe the two callbacks, success and error. So don't call this success, rather say call it as a next callback because it's going to emit the next value, error. Here, success and error because there is going to be only one value. So it makes sense to call it success, while it makes sense to call next here rather than calling success. Any questions so far with respect to observables? So you may not be doing this in Angular as part of Angular course, but it's good idea that you know how to create an observer. So this would be done by the uh, Angular system when you make an HTTP call. HTTP.get actually returns this observer. It actually prepares an observer and gives you. Your responsibility is to call subscribe on it. But when you want to write some tests, unit tests, and you want to go to the next level or advanced level, it's a good idea that you know how you can create an observer. Okay, we know now what are arrow functions. Pretty much you can convert this function to arrow function as well. And let's talk about some of the operators that we have. So I'll hit enter here and say map. So map is an operator that you want to transform something. So I'll say something like this. What this means is I'm writing a function here which has one parameter and I'm saying take that parameter and then multiply it by 10. If that's the transformation that I would like to make. So instead of saying map, you can even say map. This function would execute because this is a callback function. But again, if you have only one line, it makes more sense to make it arrow function rather than writing a function. So let's see what's the output is going to be. See? Transform, right? The data that is returned is 1, 2, 3, 4, but I'm multiplying it with 10. So it's doesn't mean that you have to only you can do this. You can transform whatever format you want. You want to strip some properties. You don't want some properties from an object. In our case, our API is returning this metadata and data. You just want to get this data passed. You don't want this everything useless object for us. You want to remove them, or you want to remove this metadata property. You'll call delete on this object. I'm taking numbers here, so I'm just transforming it, but you cannot do this multiplied by 10 here because it's not a number, it's an object. In object, you may want to add something, you may want to remove something, or so on, or you may want to change the structure of an object. You have unlimited possibilities with this map. Okay, now I'll go ahead and comment this. The next operator we'll see is filter. So you might have already guessed, like you want to filter something. So I want to filter only even numbers. And that's the logic. I percentile 2 equals to 0. If it is an even, then only just give me, otherwise don't. See, you'll only get 2, 4. And the same way you can use catch operator also to catch the errors. And the next operator is if you want to convert this to promise. So still after this session, if you're not comfortable with observable, you want to go with traditional promises, you can convert an observable into a promise and call then function on top of it because it's now a promise and you can call. And it's like a, again, you are degrading or downgrading this one because observables have a lot of potential. If you're converting it to a promise, you are somewhere losing that potential because promises are not that rich, at least when you compare with observables. Still, you have an option to convert it into a promise. Not many people do it. I wouldn't encourage you to do it. But again, if you want to for some reason, you can convert this observable into a promise and call then function on it if that makes you comfortable. So any questions so far? We'll stop the discussion of RxJS here. This is just a brief overview of observables, and the Angular uses extensively these observables. So maybe this is going to be a future like part of JavaScript library in future, but at this moment it's not. So you need this third-party library to be installed. Continue with this. But when it becomes a part of our JavaScript library, you can pretty much get rid of this. You don't need it anymore. So that's how the promises were. Even for promises were not part of JavaScript library initially. So we used to import some libraries such as Q, or there are many promise libraries, and get the job done. But once it becomes part of JavaScript, and we got rid of that library. So let's come back and now see whatever we made, whatever we have prepared, does that make sense or not? So http.get returns an observable. So we are calling subscribe on it. And the first parameter is the success. So we have learned that these parentheses are not strictly necessary here. And this is a success callback function, this error, and this finally complete. I don't need complete because unless you have some scenario that you want to catch the completed, then only you need that complete callback. But these two callbacks are enough for us. And if you have more than one line of code, pretty much you can wrap this inside braces. Here I want to do console.log my response. Here it is. That's mine. I can do console.log, or I can go to my sources and put a breakpoint and debug it. Let's see how we can debug using Chrome. Go to sources and say Control O, search for the file, and users.component.ts is the file that I'm looking at. Looks like this is a converted file. I don't need it. Rather, I want my source code, actual source code. Here it is. And put a breakpoint wherever you want to. Here, here, and let's refresh the page. This should hit the breakpoint. F10, go to the next line. F11 to go step into the method. See, the breakpoint is hitting. So I can say F10. This is asynchronous code. Once this is executed, the control will come here. See, it is coming here because there is some delay involved in it, and this callback will execute later. So if you want to catch, even get into this callback, you just click on this icon, and here you are. See, you have response. You can pretty much check what is in the response. You have pretty much everything what you have in Visual Studio Code, like locals and call stack. You can watch some variables if you want. You can add it, and you can do a lot of stuff like this. This error will not execute even if you put a breakpoint because there are no errors in the API. So that's how you debug. And we have few more minutes. Let's get back to our API and try to fix the issue with the cores so that we can focus on our products application tomorrow onwards. Probably this was the API. No, this is not. Okay, there are too many such applications. I don't exactly remember which one. Let's open this. Probably this one. Okay, so we need one package by the name cors to allow cors. Cors stands for cross origin resource sharing. So your origins are different, the API origin and the application origin. So in that case, you need to have this cors installed. Just save, and you will go to index.js and say cors require cors stands for cross origin resource sharing. So you're sharing the resources with some other different origin. And pretty much you can use this library as a middleware. You'll say app.use cors, and if you the cors is a function, but if you want to restrict it to only localhost, probably you'll say localhost 3000. So this API is not really again secure API, so I'll just go with some origin that I'm saying okay, allow everything. Whoever is requesting, allow everyone. Cors. So if you go and check the documentation of them, the Cors API, you will know how to allow multiple origins. Here, with one parameter, I can allow only one origin. But if you want to allow multiple origins, because there could be in one company, multiple projects want to access your API. In that case, you can allow multiple origins. Save this and make sure our application works after this change. Okay, it's running on 4000. Let's quickly check that out. Here it is. Seems to be working fine, and tomorrow we'll go ahead and see that products will stop here today. I'll push all these changes and let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, we can wrap this up. What issue you're getting? Authentication? Yeah. Okay. Right. So this will ask you for username and password. Actually, there was no issue, but I updated my Windows and that seems to have ruined things. So it actually saves your credentials somewhere, the Git, and Windows update might have caused some issue. So okay, now I passed correct username and password and it simply worked. It pushed. So try one more time. Otherwise, you can save the username and password. So probably you can find out somewhere on the Google how can you do that. Because rather than entering username and password each time, it makes more sense to save somewhere. So that actually Git takes care of that. You have Git commands to do that. So you'll say Git global, your username. So you can do that. So you need to find out that command. Yeah. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you tomorrow then.